There's going to be another action.
CKD. Sorry for the interruption. We'll be studying it under endocrine changes in CKD, the normal growth pattern with alteration in CKD patients, the etiology of growth failure in CKD, and treatment in which it is general and specific, which is use of recombinant human growth hormone. Now, the endocrine changes in CKD, they comprise of either changes in the serum concentration of the hormones or the diminished target organ responsiveness. Now, the changes in the serum concentration can be either increased concentration of the hormones or decreased. Now, the increase can be because majority of the polypeptide hormones, they will undergo clearance via the kidney. So, if there is a decrease in renal mass as occurs in CKD, there will be decrease in the clearance and hence the serum concentrations will be high. As for example, we'll be studying later the level of insulin hormone or growth hormone. Because of the decrease clearance, there will be increase in the plasma levels. At the same time, decrease in the serum concentrations can occur when a particular axis or hormonal axis is affected. For example, like in a gonadotropic axis, the levels of the testosterone decrease. Now, the diminished target organ responsiveness can be because of decrease in the receptors, presence of inhibitors, which are nothing but the binding proteins. Now, they will compete with the actual hormone, and so the effectiveness of that hormone will be decreased. Post receptor defect is seen especially with insulin and growth hormone. Then there can be increased activation of the prohormones. Like in the case of insulin, there will be increased levels of proinsulin and C-peptide. And another way of resistance can be because of the less bioactive form available. That is because of altered silation or glycosylation seen in uremia. Now we will be studying each of the each of the various hormones which get affected in CKD. Now coming to the gonadotropic axis, in short, to summarize, there will be hypothalamus, which will secrete gonadotropin releasing hormone, which will act on the anterior pituitary, which will cause release of LH and FSH, and then which will act on the gonads to release testosterone and estradiol. Now in CKD, in quantitatively, the levels of testosterone are decreased. The peripheral conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone is also decreased. Estradiol levels remain normal to low. Inhibin, which is secreted by the Sertoli cells, it increases. And the levels of LH and FSH, though they increase, but this increase is inadequate to the degree of hypogonadism. This means that there will be some defect at the hypothalamus as well, which can be seen, but there will be decreased pulsatile secretion of gonadotropin release hormone, and this is usually GABA mediated. With this, GABA accumulates in uremia, which is gamma aminobutyric acid. Qualitatively, there will be less biologically active form of gonadotropins, like it is measured by a LH bioactivity index, which is the ability of the LH to secrete testosterone. So that is decreased. Another important hormone to consider here is prolactin. Now this prolactin, here, because of the decreased clearance, the level is increased, as well as there is hypersecretion of prolactin in uremia. Now this, as we know, prolactin inhibits the release of gonadotropins. Hence, there is more suppression of the release of gonadotropins. Now, renal transplant is effective in restoring this balance. Clinically, the patients will present with delayed puberty, delayed development of secondary sexual characters, delayed menarche, and sometimes the reproductive function also gets affected. And it can be so severe that it can get permanently affected also. Now in females, they can have, the babies can have increased chances of small for gestational age or IUGR. Coming to the somatotropic axis, here the hypothalamus will secrete the growth hormone releasing hormone, which will act on the pituitary to release growth hormone. Now this growth hormone, the prime essential function is to act on the liver and skeletal muscles. On the liver, in the liver, it causes generation of insulin-like growth factors. Now, these insulin-like growth factors will then bring about a further effects like growth, metabolism, and proliferation. And the effect of this insulin-like growth factors is inhibited by this presence of insulin-like growth factor binding proteins, which I mentioned earlier will compete at the receptor site. So, individually, if we consider growth hormone, there is variable secretion, which is increased in prepubertal, decreased in pubertal population. There are increased plasma and fasting levels because of decreased clearance. But the most important point to highlight is that in CKD is a state of growth hormone resistance. Now, this resistance is usually seen at the post-receptor signaling defect, which we'll be studying later. Also, there is a sustained and prolonged response to the growth hormone releasing hormone. Coming to the insulin-like growth factor, normally IGF is present in two forms, the IGF-1 and 2. But the IGF-2 is predominantly present in fetal life. IGF-1 is the more abundant form available. In CKD, the levels of IGF decrease, but IGF-2 levels increase. So if we consider as a whole, the total IGF levels remain normal, but the free form and the bioactive form of IGF-1 will decrease. Also, of the available IGF, there is presence of IGF-1 resistance. Now, this is because of the presence of inhibitors. These inhibitors are insulin-like growth factor binding proteins. Now, there are total 6 insulin-like growth factor binding proteins. Of these, the levels of 1, 2, 4, and 6 increase, while that of the intact insulin-like growth factor binding protein decrease. The imbalance between these is responsible for the insulin-like growth factor resistance. Now, coming to the post-receptor defect, here in this figure, we see the growth hormone is binding to the growth hormone receptor. This causes phosphorylation. This is via the JAK-STAT pathway, which is the Janus kinase and signal transduction and transcription pathway. Here, after the binding of growth hormone to the growth hormone receptor, there will be phosphorylation of JAK2, which will further cause phosphorylation of STAT, usually the STAT5. Then there will be internalization of the STAT in the nucleus, where it will bring about transcription and generation of particularly insulin-like growth factor. Now, in CKD, what happens is there is increased production of SOCS. Now, what are these SOCS? SOCS are suppressor of cytokine signaling. As we all know, CKD is a state of inflammation and various cytokines are secreted. So in response of that, these SOCS are secreted in SOCS2 and 3. Now, in CKD, these levels, the levels of SOCS2 and 3 are increased more. So because of these increased SOCS2, they are implicated in inhibition of phosphorylation of JAK2 and STAT. So the further action of growth hormone is inhibited. Another mechanism of growth hormone resistance is that there can be increased protein tyrosine phosphatase activity, which will prevent the phosphorylation of STAT. A special mention of corticosteroids. Corticosteroids, they cause suppression of pulsatile release of growth hormone from the pituitary. This is via the effect of somatostatin. Other effect is they will cause decreased growth hormone mRNA synthesis and insensitivity of the growth plate to the growth hormone and insulin-like growth factor 1. Per se, they can have direct effect on the mineralization and incorporation of sulfate in the chondrocytes. Coming to the thyroid axis, yeah, in CKD, it is seen that there is decrease in the levels of T4, but there is more decrease in the levels of T3 as compared to T4, as well as the free forms of these thyroid hormones are also diminished. But in spite of T3, T4 being low, the TSH levels remain normal. Also, there is a blunted response of TSH to thyroid releasing hormone. Other parameters are that, as mentioned earlier, free T3, T4 decreases, the reverse T3 decreases, and the thyroid binding globulin, it's normal on patients on hemodialysis and decreased in patients on CAPD. So we have a state where we have more low T3 as compared to T4 and a normal TSH. So it is like we see in low T3 syndrome or sick euthyroid patients. So clinically, the patients are euthyroid. So this can be the mechanism of the body to adapt to the various like hypermetabolic state of CKD by decreasing or keeping the levels of hormones at a lower state. So exogenous hormone supplementation is only indicated when you have clinically hypothyroidism or when TSH is elevated. Per se, both the things like hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism both can occur in CKD patients, but it is necessary to avoid unnecessary supplementation of thyroid hormones. A special mention on in patients with hemodialysis, the heparin interferes with the T4 binding site, so there will be increased levels of T4 for 24 hours. This is a similar findings with high dose furosemide. So this is essential when we have to take samples if you want to see for hypothyroidism. Other important factors, iodinated contrast, because there is decreased clearance, the iodine is per se increased. So if you give iodinated contrast, there is increased risk of hyperthyroidism. Adrenal axis, we have the corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, which will cause release of ACTH and will act on the adrenal, that is the adrenal cortex. On the zona fasciculata, there will be release of cortisol. On zona glomerulosa, there will be release of aldosterone, and reticularis, there will be release of androgen. Now, in the case of CKD patients, clinically, the patients with CKD can have features of both, like increased Cushing syndrome as well as adrenal insufficiency. Now, in patients with CKD, the levels of cortisol are increased due to decreased clearance. But an important point to highlight between those with patients of Cushing's disease and adrenal hormone changes in CKD is that the diurnal variation is preserved in patients with CKD. The levels of cortisol are increased during hemodialysis. Aldosterone levels, they remain normal in case of CAPD patients and increased in hemodialysis. Androgen levels, there is quite variation is seen. The low levels on hemodialysis, but normal in conservatively managed. Another point is that the ACTH, there is blunted response to hypoglycemia and exogenous steroid administration, which means that the entire axis at some point is affected in CKD. The clinical implication is that post-transplant, when we are giving exogenously steroids, the adrenal hormone or the adrenal axis is suppressed. So there is an increased risk of adrenal insufficiency in case of crisis, like in the case of any surgical event or in the case of acute infection, or if the steroids are withdrawn abruptly. Other is that there can be accidental adrenalectomy during nephrectomy. Then in perinatal period, adrenal hemorrhage and then adrenal insufficiency can occur due to coagulation disorders. And rarely, amyloidosis can affect the kidney and cause adrenal insufficiency. Glucose intolerance is sometimes seen in CKD patients. Now, this glucose intolerance will depend upon two factors. One is the insulin secretion, which happens from the release from the beta cells of the pancreas. And second is the tissue responsiveness to insulin. Now, the fasting levels of insulin, they remain normal. There is increased levels of proinsulin and C-peptide. There is increased plasma half-life of insulin. But the rhythmic pattern, like normally it is secreted in frequently with low amplitude pattern. So this rhythmic pattern of insulin secretion is affected. Now the beta cell response is variable. This can be seen by two techniques. One is there are two techniques to identify insulin secretion and insulin resistance. One is the euglycemia clamp technique. In euglycemia clamp technique, we give a level of glucose in such a way that a basal level of insulin is maintained, such that how much amount of glucose has been infused, that will denote the peripheral uptake of glucose. Whereas in the hyperglycemia clamp technique, we'll give a large dose of glucose such that glucose levels are kept twice the fasting level. Here we will see two responses. The initial response will be the response which will be seen because of the release of insulin from the beta cell of pancreas, and the delayed response will be the tissue uptake of glucose. So that will indicate insulin sensitivity. Now in CKD patients, this beta cell response can be variable. Initially, there can be either increased release of insulin, or there will be normal release, or there can be low release of insulin. But the delayed response is always increased. So that will denote that we are requiring more insulin for peripheral uptake. So that is indicating a phase of insulin resistance. Now, the factors affecting secretion are one is mentioned as a secondary hyperparathyroidism. Now, this is via a mechanism like it will cause influx of calcium in the beta cells and then per se decrease the release of insulin. Now, this insulin resistance is marked by a decrease in the tissue sensitivity to insulin, a diminished splanchnic glucose extraction, an increased hepatic gluconeogenesis, and decreased peripheral glucose uptake. The etiology that can be because of inflammation, per se cytokines and interleukins, they per se cause insulin resistance. Other is for response to inflammation, these suppressor of cytokines are generated, and they are also responsible for bringing about insulin resistance. Other is there is a presence of an unknown dialysable factor. The clinical implication is that you will see that this insulin resistance improves after dialysis. Then 125 hydroxy vitamin D deficiency is implicated. Anemia as well as iron overload, both both of them can cause insulin resistance, and there is improvement seen after giving erythropoietin. And obesity, as we all know, individually it can cause insulin resistance. Now, glucagon is increased in CKD patients. Now, other group of molecules are the adipokines, which are the polypeptide hormones which will play a role in cell metabolism. So the imbalance between them, like leptin is increased, levels of adiponectin are decreased, resistin are increased, and bisfactin are increased. So all these levels, the changes in these levels are responsible for bringing about insulin resistance. Now coming to the growth in CKD, this is a graph which is showing age in years on x-axis and height in centimeters of y-axis, and showing two patterns, one which we see the normal growth curve and the growth in CKD patients. Now, the initial phase is the fetal growth. It contributes to 30% of the growth. Then comes the infant phase, where up to 2 years, where it is the phase where growth in CKD is maximally affected, because the growth potential per se is lost, and it depends upon nutrition. Then we have the childhood phase, where the growth then continues along the centile, means along the curve of the centile, obviously on the lower side. Then we have the pubertal phase, where the pubertal growth spurt is delayed, and as well as the intensity of the growth is also hampered. So you get the final height, which is low. So in short, the fetal phase, poor intrauterine growth conditions can further affect growth, like maternal malnutrition, smoking, or there can be genetic abnormalities like dysregulation of Wilms tumor suppressor gene, which can cause hypodysplasia and then affect the growth. Now, infantile phase, it is maximally affected. It will depend on nutritional intake and all other factors which we need to correct, like malnutrition due to recurrent vomiting or any water electrolyte imbalances, anemia, and MBD parameters. So if these are not corrected, then here the growth is maximally affected. Childhood phase is somatotropic growth axis dependent. And here we see that the segmental growth is affected. That is, the sitting height remains fairly normal, but the lower limbs are affected more. Pubertal phase is gonadotropic axis dependent. And here we see that there is subnormal peak height velocity, delayed growth spurt, and delayed growth period. Now, some specific diseases, renal hypodysplasia. Here the growth is affected at the early stage because the patients go into CKD at an earlier stage. Important point here is that there is excessive loss of fluid. They'll have polyuria, they'll have hypokalemia, There can be sodium losses. So these per se individually can cause growth failure in these children. So it is necessary to correct these losses and even the acidosis, and proteinuria management is important. Coming to the glomerular diseases, congenital nephrotic syndrome, there will be growth failure due to edema, recurrent infection, malnutrition, and loss of proteins and peptide hormones. So treatment here is to treat the proteinuria. In severe cases, if these edema infections are not getting treated, then we might have to do a bilateral nephrectomy and shift the patient to dialysis in the case of ESRD patients. And in unilateral nephrectomy and use of ACE inhibitors can also be tried. Tubulointerstitial diseases, in cystinosis, the growth failure occurs quite early, even if prior to the patient going into ESRD. This can be because of losses of fluids, electrolytes, and so the growth is affected early. Later on, the growth can get affected due to growth plate dysfunction and endocrine dysfunction. That is, usually they have overt hypothyroidism because there is cystine crystal deposition even in the thyroid. In the early stages, cysteamine can be tried, and recombinant growth hormone is an effective option. In primary hyperoxaluria, we can try citrate pyridoxine in early stages. Ultimate treatment is combined liver and kidney transplant, but even then the growth response is not so significant. So the final height prediction, the positive contributors are younger age of transplant, delayed onset of dialysis, minimizing the dose of corticosteroids for immunosuppression, and use of recombinant growth hormone. Whereas early age of CKD, longer duration on dialysis, and congenital nephropathies negatively contribute for predicting the final height. Etiology of growth failure in CKD. So initially are the genetic factors, which will be parental height, gender, syndromes, such as like Bardet-Biedl syndrome, and which where per se the growth potential is affected. Then birth-related factors will be small for gestational age, prematurity, intensive care requirement in the early ages. Then comorbidities, if there is associated heart disease or respiratory disease or gastrointestinal diseases. Socioeconomic status, it is seen in studies that the growth of patients in CKD depends upon the gross national income of that particular country. And here the importance is of growth hormone, that there is in low socioeconomic group, there will be no immediate access or no proper access to the growth hormone because of the financial issues. Age at onset of CKD, younger the age, more likely the growth retardation. Duration and residual renal function on dialysis, longer the duration, more likely the chances of growth retardation. They say that on dialysis, there is a higher chance of growth hormone resistance. Then severity of CKD, then metabolic disturbances such as salt and water metabolism with excess loss of salt, excess loss of water in the tubular diseases that can cause growth failure. Metabolic acidosis and mineral bone disease in the form of secondary hyperparathyroidism. Other factors are malnutrition and protein energy wasting. Now, these two terms are, again, we need to distinguish. In malnutrition, there will be utilization of the fat tissue and the body basal metabolic rate and the lean body mass is preserved. So here, if we treat the nutritional deficiency, there can be growth achieved. Whereas in the case of protein energy wasting, the lean body mass and the basal metabolic rate is compromised. So there is more affection of growth in protein energy wasting. Now, this malnutrition can be because of anorexia, that is because of the increased levels of satiety hormones, which increases in CKD because of, again, decreased clearance. Then vomiting, because many patients have gastroesophageal reflux, and there can be altered taste sensation. Now, a special mention of malnutrition, inflammation, atherosclerosis syndrome. It is this malnutrition has been linked to this complex syndrome. It is seen especially in the dialysis patients. So this is because of decreased clearance of cytokines or oxidative stress or nutrient losses during dialysis, low nutrient intake, uremic toxicity, or volume overload. Anemia, it is seen mentioned that poor appetite, intercurrent infections, cardiac complications, and poor oxygenation of cartilage cells in the growth plate. Because of all these factors, growth failure can occur. So erythropoietin is useful, but in the case only acutely. Chronically, there have not been any studies which show that there has been a significant catch-up growth. And as we have discussed, the hormonal disturbances affecting the somatotropic, gonadotropic axis, vitamin D and PTH, and gastrointestinal hormones. Coming to metabolic acidosis, it is associated with decreased longitudinal growth and increased protein breakdown, increased glucocorticoid production, down regulation of spontaneous GH secretion, and causing a state of growth hormone insensitivity. Now, this was a study which showed the level of bicarb and leucine levels. So on the x-axis, we have the serum bicarbonate levels, and on the y-axis, we have the endogenous leucine, which has been obtained because of protein breakdown. So we see that as the plasma bicarb levels decrease, like in metabolic acidosis, there will be increased leucine in the blood that will signify increased protein breakdown, and which will per se cause growth failure. Secondary hyperparathyroidism, it is seen that if there are levels more than 500 picogram per ml, they can bring about a significant change in height standard deviation scores. Now here we see a study in which on x-axis we have the mean intact PTH levels, and on y-axis we have the annual change in the height SDS score. Here we see that as the levels go increasing, especially above 500, there will be significant decrease in the height, as that is seen in a decrease in the SDS score in children with CKD. Treatment, initially nutritional correction is important. That will include enteral feeding or gastrostomy feeding. Calorie intake should be 80 to 100% of the daily required intake of healthy child, and 100% of protein intake is required. 2 points to take into consideration are that overcorrection or giving over treatment with calories and protein should be avoided, because in the case of calories, it can cause obesity, and high protein intake can cause increase in the phosphorus load and nitrogen balance. Here, as majority of the children are like in malnutrition and they have stunted growth, the height age rather than the chronological age has to be taken into consideration. Losses in PD around 0.2 to 0.4 grams per kg per day, usually lost in peritoneal dialysis, have to be compensated. Others are that there is sodium loss like 5 millimoles per kg per day, and metabolic acidosis, the level has to be kept about at 22 millimole per liter. Then you have to correct the fluid losses, electrolyte disturbances, metabolic acidosis, anemia, and the MBD parameters, and physical activity is required. Now, intensified hemodialysis or daily hemodiafiltration is very effective by bringing about enhanced clearance of the satiety hormones, inflammatory cytokines. And there is also a better response seen to growth hormone. This was a study which was done by Fishbach et al. Here, the patients were switched from thrice daily hemodialysis sessions to daily hemodiafiltration session. And the recombinant growth hormone was already going on. This is a graph of a single patient. Here we see that as soon as the session was changed to daily hemodiafiltration, there was a significant catch-up growth seen, as shown by the arrow. In PD, residual renal function has positive association with improved growth, but high transporter status is usually associated with microinflammation and growth hormone resistance. Transplant, the predictors of post-transplant catch-up growth are that if transplant occurs at an earlier age, there will be more catch-up growth occurring. It will depend on the degree of growth retardation. Graft function, if less than 60, EGFR less than 60 ml per minute per 1.73 meter square, then the catch-up growth is not so significant. Steroid-free immunosuppression is a better option, but at the same time, we have to see the risk of graft rejection. And in living donor and deceased donor, it is seen that catch-up growth occurs better with a living donor. Here we see 20 allograft recipients. This graph shows where the steroids were continued, but when the steroids were withdrawn post-transplant, there was a significant improvement in the height SDS observed. On x-axis is time, and y-axis there is height SDS score. Coming to the recombinant human growth hormone. Now, this growth hormone is prepared by recombinant DNA technology. It is a 22 kilodalton molecular weight substance. Previously, pituitary extracts, human extracts were used, but then they caused various diseases like Creutzfeldt-Jakob. So they were withdrawn. And so currently, this recombinant human growth hormone is used. Now, this work up and indications have taken from the ESPN guidelines for the growth hormone treatment in CKD patients. So the workup before initiating growth hormone treatment is that we have to document that the patient is short stature, that is if the height is less than third centile, and the height velocity, which has to be calculated over a minimum period of 6 months and compared with the standardized charts. Growth potential of the child is assessed by means of the genetic target height on the basis of the mid-parental height. So this is calculated by means of the Tanner's formula, which is different for boys and different for girls. For the boys, we'll do father's height plus mother's height plus 13 upon 2, whereas in the case of girls, we'll just subtract 13. Then other growth potential should be assessed by means of epiphysis of the left wrist, that if it is open, then there is a scope for more growth potential. Other workup will be the basic, that you will see the renal function test, the MBD parameters to rule out secondary hyperparathyroidism, then albumin, fasting glucose levels, glycosylated hemoglobin levels, serum thyroid hormone levels, and IGF-1 values, fundoscopic examination to rule out any presence of any intracranial hypertension, which can be per se as a potential or a possible adverse effect of growth hormone. So previously only we can do a fundoscopic examination and rule out papilledema. Then radiography of the left wrist and pubertal status according to Tanner. Now the indications for growth hormone are height age less than third centile and height velocity less than 25th centile for age and gender, beyond 3 months in infants and 6 months in children and adolescents. It is growth hormone is indicated for children above the age of 6 months, because per se 3 months, the studies have been seen only in children above 3 months, and before starting growth hormone we would like to know the growth potential of the child. Then it is indicated in CKD stages 3 and 5, with the exception of nephropathic cystinosis, where it can be started at earlier, because the growth gets affected in the early stages of CKD as well. But important point is that all the potential correctable causes like anemia, acidosis, then MBD parameters, all have to be corrected before initiating the growth hormone treatment. So this is just a graph to show the growth velocity chart. Like they are different for boys and girls, which shows x-axis, age on x-axis, and height velocity. So we have to calculate over a minimum at least 6 months and then plot it. The treatment is, a dose is 0.05 mg per kg or 4 international units per meter square daily. These are the subcutaneous injections to be given in the evening. And it is better to encourage children to take the, like at between 8 to 10 years and above, to take injections on their own, so that there will be better adherence and compliance ensured. Then follow-up can be done 3 to 6 monthly or frequently. In younger children and in advanced stage, more frequently the follow-up has to be done. We will monitor the same investigations that we had done at the before initiating, that we will like to see the stature, whether it's improving, height, velocity, pubertal development, whether there is no excess pubertal development and bone maturation, as they have been labeled as one of the possible adverse effects of growth hormone. Then other levels of other metabolites like calcium, phosphorus, bicarbonate levels. Now, if the height velocity in the first year is less than 2 centimeters per year over baseline, so we are saying that it is the growth hormone failure is seen, then what we would like to see the assessment of the patient adherence to the growth hormone therapy, measurement of the serum IGF-1 levels, the weight adjusted GH doses, whether they are going adequately or no. And as usual, we will be seeing whether the nutritional metabolic factors are in the normal range or no. Now, when to stop growth hormone treatment? When there is a epiphyseal closure demonstrated after renal transplant for 1 year, we would like to observe whether after renal transplant there is a catch-up growth being seen. Persistent severe secondary hyperthyroidism, which is PTH more than 500 picogram per ml, occurrence of intracranial hypertension, patients with slipped capital femoral epiphysis, and if there is no adequate response to growth hormone treatment, which is less than 2 centimeter per year, observed for 6 months. whether there is any accelerated bone maturation, or whether there is unexplained decrease in estimated GFR. Cessation of therapy is indicated when the patient reaches his or her target height percentile. Contraindications for growth hormone are hyperparathyroidism, severe diabetic retinopathy, malignancy, hypersensitivity to the ingredients like which can be which are used in the injection, or any acute critical illness. Now, these are the possible because none of the studies have shown these to be seen after using growth hormone treatment, but these just are caution, and we have to be careful or be vigilant of these side effects, like secondary hyperparathyroidism. Growth hormone can increase the levels of phosphorus and then levels of calcium, and then cause secondary hyperparathyroidism, or it can cause slip capital femoral epiphysis, or if there is possible adverse effects are raised ICP, then glucose intolerance, sodium water retention, accelerated bone maturation and pubertal development, or deterioration of the renal function. Now, if we use growth hormone in various age groups, two important findings are that there is better response in pre-end stage CKD patients and good response in the earlier age group, that is in infants and children, as compared to adolescents or in pubertal children. So here was a study which showed like the recombinant hormone treatment on the treatment years on the x-axis and height SGS on the y-axis. Here we see that there was a greater improvement in height SGS in pre-end stage CKD patients, which is shown by these dark dots, as compared to those on dialysis, which is seen on these plain white dots. Then here two patients use of growth hormone was seen. The one where growth hormone was started at an earlier age at 2 years, and one where it was started at 8 years of age. Here we see that the catch-up growth in a span of around 3 years, it is seen that the catch-up achieved is better for the patient where the growth hormone was started earlier, that is at 2 years, as compared to the patient of 8 years of age. So the positive association of growth, that is the final height with the use of growth hormone, is that presence of residual renal function, that is pre-end stage CKD, heights SGS at the start of therapy, initial target height deficit, and treatment duration. Whereas negative association is age at the start of treatment and time spent on dialysis. So the key messages are CKD causes various hormonal changes due to changes in the concentration and action at the tissue level. Then it can also affect various stages of growth with various factors modifying it. CKD is a state of growth hormone and insulin resistance. And recombinant human growth hormone is an effective modality to improve height in CKD patients after improvement in the other CKD parameters. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhura, for the lovely presentation. I'll just go ahead and share the MCQ answers. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we can, Pratiji.
Okay. So I'll begin. Okay. So let's go through the MCQs and the answers. So which of the statements regarding the gonadotropic axis in CKD is or are true? Go through the options and then we'll discuss options. After the answers come back, we'll discuss every option. So kindly start putting your answers after going through the options.
Pratiji, can you see the chat?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, cool.
And nobody has written anything yet, I think. Okay, let's just come forward. Yeah. So I have the first few answers coming ahead. I have 2 people answering. So how many fellows do we have attending today? So I'll wait for those kind of answers.
I'll just count on just 1 sec. I'll let you know. I can spot at least 3.
3. Okay, so I have 2 answers, so I can go ahead then. Okay, so Dr. Monica and Dr. Parth have said 1 and 3. So let's go through it. So usually in CKD patients, puberty gets delayed, which is true. In girls, especially who've had long-term dialysis, sometimes puberty may get altered, but again, it's very rare. So in usual CKD patients, it does get delayed. The next option was low prepubertal androgen levels indicate gonadal involvement. This is the incorrect statement because low prepubertal androgen levels will just indicate the adrenocortical axis and not the gonadal axis. This is the incorrect statement. The release of testosterone as well as conversion to dihydrotestosterone, both are affected. It is true. So the Leydig cells do not release testosterone efficiently, as well as a conversion by 5-alpha reductase to dihydrotestosterone is affected. And lastly, the degree of hypergonadotropism, as Madhura said, is usually inadequate for the degree of hypogonadism because even at the hypophyseal level, the secretion of the gonadotropins is affected. So the answer is, just a minute, is 1 and 3. So 1 and 3 are true statements. So all are true about thyroid function in CKD except, kindly go through the options and put in your answers. Yes, I got the first answer. And I got the second answer. I don't think the third fellow is answering, so I just have to stick to these 2. So the answer they say is 4, which is correct. So in cystinosis, deposition of cystine crystals in thyroid can lead to hypothyroidism, which is very true. Cystinosis is one of the few conditions where the CKD children will actually need treatment with thyroxine supplements. There is more suppression of T3 than T4, which is correct to decrease peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. This third point is very important, where the central thyroid is resetted so that even at low levels of circulating thyroid hormones, there's no secretion of TSH. So this is shown as a physiological adaptation where you don't want a very high metabolic rate in the condition of uremia, where the uremia and its symptoms may get worsened. So as compared to normal children, the levels of thyroid may seem low, but they will not cause secretion of TSH, and treatment is indicated only if TSH is elevated. Otherwise, it's like a euthyroid state. The last one, I think already Madhura spoke about it. So heparin in HD, it increases the total and free T4 for at least 24 hours by displacing the binding sites and increasing the levels of total and free T4 in the blood. So if you have to do any blood collection for looking at the thyroid status, either do it pre-HD or after 24 hours of the HD session. The next MCQ, CKD related growth hormone resistance, all are true except. Kindly go through the options. Yes, so Monica and Parth both have answered as the answer as 3, which is correct. So in CKD growth hormone, in CKD related growth hormone resistance, the GH levels are high as it's a state of GH resistance. The resistance is due to post-receptor signaling defect, as well as sometimes the growth hormone receptor mRNA production is suppressed. A very important point which is expressed in the third option is the levels of the IGF may be normal or elevated, but when you look at the bioactivity, it is decreased. So the levels may be normal or elevated, but the bioactivity is decreased. And the last one, so IGF-BP acts like a binding protein to IGF and it's inversely correlated with the standardized height. So as the IGF-BP increases, the standardized height in CKD children tends to decrease. So third is the right answer. So the next one, which statement is false? This is quite straightforward. So Monica and Parth will promptly answer this question. Yes, so Monica and Parth have responded, and the answer is 1. So in CKD, it's an insulin resistant state. So the fasting insulin levels are normal or elevated. High PTH levels will impair insulin secretion by increasing the calcium intake into the cells and thus decreasing the secretion of insulin. And glucose intolerance in patients with CKD is improved by dialysis. Okay, because the insulin gets secreted, gets excreted out. The last MCQ, which of the following statements are incorrect? Monica's answered. Vaishali has answered as 3. Parth has answered as 3 and 4. So let's go through the options. So growth hormone therapy is given in children more than 6 months of age with persistent growth failure. Firstly, they're not studies many studies showing the effect of growth hormone in infants. The youngest study has shown as low as 3 to 4 months. And we also need around 6 months to figure out the actual growth potential of the child and to see whether the child has any growth failure. So we give them a time of 6 months. Workup prior to initiation of growth hormone must include fundoscopy and the X-ray of the left wrist to see the growth potential of the child and fundoscopy to see whether there is any intracranial hypertension. Growth hormone therapy cannot be started in patients with severe secondary hyperparathyroidism. So it's a contraindication for initiation of growth hormone therapy. So the third answer is incorrect. Third option is incorrect. After renal transplantation, growth hormone can be started within 1 year. So I think a couple of you said that this is also incorrect. So we at least give post-transplant, we give the child or the adolescent at least 1 year to look for the catch-up growth. And only after that do we start growth hormone. Also in the first year of transplant, there's a high exposure to corticosteroids. So the growth hormone may not be very effective as well. So it's usually started after 1 year after transplantation. So both 3 and 4 are incorrect. The last option is the injections are preferably given at bedtime because nighttime is a time when the physiological growth hormone surge occurs. So we give the injections to mimic the physiological surge. So 3 and 4 both are incorrect. So as Dr. Madhura said, we need to achieve the pro-growth state, but there are multiple barriers to achieve the pro-growth state, as the poor nutrition, there is metabolic acidosis, there is CKD-MBD, there is acidemia, there is a uremic milieu, there is a state of inflammation which is there in uremia, there's abnormal growth hormone axis, and gonadotropic axis also is affected. Once the pro-growth state is achieved, we should look at normal height and growth velocity will be normal. There'll be normal weight for height. There'll be normal muscle mass and function and normal neurodevelopment. So this was a article published in 2019. It is the European Society of Pediatric Nephrology guidelines. It's a very detailed article, and I think we should go through it. Madhura has done a great job going through all the recommendations. So it talks about the workup before initiation of growth hormone, talks about assessment of indications and contraindications, and growth hormone treatment and monitoring. It's a free access article. I'll also put it in the fellows forum, so you can access it. So the recombinant growth hormone molecules are made of two types, the innovator molecules and the biosimilar molecules. So what do the innovator molecules mean? These were the original patented recombinant growth hormone molecules which first came out in the market, and after the patency expired. What does patency mean? That only that company is allowed to produce these molecules. So once the patency expired, multiple other companies also began to produce similar molecules. They took a recipe from these companies and they made their own molecules. These are called as biosimilar molecules. So I will just show which are the current available in the market. So there is Norditropin and there is Geniotropin, which is made by the Pfizer group. And the biosimilar molecules include the Head-On, which is, I don't think it's Ranbaxy anymore. I think it's Sun Pharma. The Utropin by the Cipla. And recently the Reliance group jumped in on this wagon, and the Somatoril is the brand name. The first difference we can clearly see as the innovator molecules come in these pre-filled syringes, which really make the administration very easy. You just have to turn the knob, which is here, which shows the dose which will be administered, and it's easy for administration. While the biosimilar molecules, they come in vials. So we have to withdraw in a syringe and give it like how we do for insulin. So coming to the cost factor, the innovator molecules cost around 300 to 450 per unit. So 1 unit is around 0.3 milligram. While these biosimilar molecules cost around 160 to 250 per unit. So for a 20-kilo child, the cost of the innovator molecules will be around 29,000, and the biosimilar molecules will cost around 16,000 per month. So it's a very expensive affair for our patients who do not, even have a income of so much in a month. So there is research going on about certain ways how we can improve the response to growth hormone therapy. One is the role of SOC2, which is seen both in insulin resistance as well as in growth hormone resistance in CKD. Whether we can, targeted approach towards these molecules can help us in improving the therapy with growth hormone. Secondly, if the child is not responding to growth hormone therapy, maybe adding a recombinant IGF-1 may improve the growth potential. And lastly, IGF, the binding proteins are one of the key factors in causing growth hormone resistance. So certain displacers have been studied which can displace IGF BP and free the IGF-1 and cause increased action of the IGF-1. They're still in the pipeline. Yeah, so that was it regarding the recent couple of studies. Anybody has any thoughts to add or any questions to ask?
Pratichi, this is Dr. Jyoti Singhal. Actually, ma'am had to leave for something. So there's one
Okay.
question in the chat box, which Dr. Monica wants to know: is growth hormone associated with risk of rejection in post-transplant period?
Okay, that's a very good question. Okay.
Ma'am, so I just want to add to the question that there has been some concerns of malignancy also in the post-transplant period in the allograft. And also there is increased risk of hyperparathyroidism and also increased risk of rejection on using growth hormone in post-transplant patients. So if you can throw some light on that.
Yes. So growth hormone does cause a bit of, it does desettle the immunity in certain ways, so it does cause certain cytokine action. So it has been said that probably giving growth hormone in transplant patient can cause rejection because it does modulate the immune function. However, multiple studies, not multiple, I would say few studies have been done, not like exactly an RCT, looking at patients with transplant on growth hormone and without growth hormone, and there have been no significant results, frankly. So though the concerns have been raised because growth hormone does cause some amount of immune dysfunction, whether it will lead into rejection, but the studies have not shown that it does cause any rejection. So yes, so as I said, all the relative contraindications part you did ask me, all of them have been raised, but mostly studies have shown that growth hormone does not conclusively cause any of them. There are reports, but doesn't conclusively cause either malignancy or rejection. But yes, concerns have been raised.
Okay. First of all, let me also thank Dr. Purvi Agarwal for joining the talk. I think she has one comment which she has put up in the chat where she says that IGF binding protein 3 is a better marker for CKD patients as compared to IGF-1, which is more commonly used in other patients. So if any other member in the chat, if they have any comment in their experience about use of growth hormone or in dealing with growth in CKD.
Platform क्रमांक 4 पर आने वाली लोकल will be ma'ams at the station.
Okay, so I think if no one else has any comments or any questions, so I'd like to thank Madhura for a very
Thank you, ma'am. Can I add something here?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, ma'am, there's a difference in other chronic diseases in children and CKD. Like CKD are short at the outset itself. So, how much ever we improve the nutrition, the metabolism status, we can never catch up. So, I think the mobilization of growth hormone, like even Madhura said, that the response is not very nice as the age progresses. So I think the mobilization of growth part should be as early as we are mobilizing the dialysis. I think it should go hand in hand and not like a follow-up procedure. Maybe that would improve the outcomes. Sorry, I was traveling, so there must be noise issue in the background, but this is what I've seen, that the more we delay, the more are the sad outcomes maybe.
Yeah, yes, Dr. Purvi, I completely agree that there's never going to be a perfect nutrition, perfect CKD,
Right.
MBD parameters.
Right.
That's never going
Right.
to happen in any of our CKD patients.
Right.
It's very rare.
Right.
So early initiation of growth hormone is absolutely important. We do
Right.
have a big issue with the funds, and
I know.
that I think that is the biggest concern than the hesitation in starting it, because
Right.
we will start,
Yes.
but the funds is I think the main issue, because getting everything right to start a medication is never going to happen.
Yeah. So maybe these yojnas like MPJY, which also fund the dialysis, I think we can also put the need of growth hormone as a parallel therapy and not just a cosmetic benefit is what I feel. That was only my input, but a very nice talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if there's no any more comment or query from anyone else, I think thank you, Madhura, for a very lucid talk. I think the slides were very nice and nicely you have covered all the points associated. And thank you, Pratichi, for moderating this session and taking up all the queries and summarizing the whole topic in the end.
Thank you.
So I think,
you, ma'am.
yeah, so I think I'll end the meeting now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.